Two other key terms in population education are innovation and renovation. Innovation, to innovate, is to do something new. You innovate, you do something for the first time. To renovate is to make something old new again. So these two key terms are important in population education because a goal often suggested for population education concerns the contribution it might make to educational renovation and innovation. Educational renovation. I said earlier that a lot of other disciplines tie into the population education realm. So, how do we renovate? We've taught something in sociology, we've taught something in psychology over years in a different context. Now, how do we renovate? How do we fix this in a new context and teach it in terms of population education? That's renovation. Or the other thing, educational innovation, is how do we find a new way of doing it? A brand new way, something that no one's done before. That is innovation. So as teachers, we need to be good at innovating and renovating and decide when we need to do which. We can't do renovating all the time. You can't do innovation all the time. You have to decide when renovation will work and when innovation will work. That is the teacher's job. So far, the introduction of population education in school and out-of-school programs has, in the main, simply meant adding and integrating new content. This is a new field. So either we add something to a discipline and we say we should teach this, we should teach this, we should teach this, or what we say is we should teach this in economics, we should teach this in psychology, we should teach this in sociology, and so on. So we either add or we integrate. So we either rise vertically if we're adding, or we spread horizontally if we are integrating. But if that's all we do, that's not sufficient. Neither of this is innovation or renovation. In a very limited sense, these additions may be thought of as innovatory insofar as any extra content implies at least some reorganization of a learning system. So if we are in the adding mode, add this topic, add this topic, add this topic, it may be considered to be innovation in a rudimentary manner, at a very basic level, because if we add something, we have to get rid of something too. So if we keep adding and never get rid of anything, our content would go beyond the scope of a course, a semester, a term, a year, or however way we teach. But population education programs have generally used the methods and approaches of the educational systems of which they were a part. So if we take a psychology concept or we take an economics concept, we teach it that way. The psychology concept is taught based on psychology. The economics concept is taught based on economics. And so nothing changes and there's nothing new. So again, it lacks innovation and renovation. If we want to teach the same topics through the population education perspective, some innovation or renovation will need to be done. Today, many educators argue that goals of population education require teaching learning methods which will be innovatory and renovatory in most education systems. If I want to teach population education as a discipline, whether it's on its own or integrated, I will have to do one of the two, innovate or renovate, and teacher training programs will have to help teachers learn how to do both these things, and then the teacher will have to determine whether the teacher wants to innovate or renovate based on the topic or issue under discussion or needs to be taught. In traditional or formal settings, and where the teaching learning process tends to be teacher rather than learner oriented, and unfortunately, most of our education is teacher oriented. School, college, university level, the teacher is the focus. It should not be. The students need to be the focus of anything that happens in education. So if we are going to move away from a teacher-centered, teacher-dominated, teacher-focused classroom to a more student-centered, student-focused, student-dominated classroom, our teaching methodologies will have to change. And in order to do that, we will have to either innovate, find new ways of doing things, or renovate, modify, and adapt the old ways into some other new way of doing the teaching so that our students can get it. Here, the methods implied by these goals can rightly be viewed as proposals of change. Innovation or renovation will bring about change. If you want the status quo, forget it. Don't bother with innovation or renovation. Innovation and renovation must, by their very definition, bring about some change. In systems already using less formal and learner-centered approaches, population education is bound to reinforce the trends toward innovation and renovation. We've seen in the better institutions a trend that moves classroom practice from being teacher-centered to being student-centered. In those kinds of settings, if teachers have been taught, have been trained into making a student-centered classroom, then most of these population education teaching methodologies will lead themselves into innovation and renovation. The teachers will have to do it. You will not be able to teach a new content area, a new discipline, using old methods. In case of educational or learning systems which are not being significantly changed, it is unlikely, of course, that introducing a population education program would be in itself greatly modifying the system. So what does this mean? If systems are still teacher-oriented, teacher-centered, population education cannot be taught in such settings. It is imperative for population education classes to make sure that they are student-centered and participatory. However, in the educational settings undergoing change in organization and content, population education can contribute, can make its share. Systems that are planning on moving away from teacher-centered to student-centered teaching, population education can help make that transition easier and smoother for those institutions. Particularly where innovation and renovation is directed towards interdisciplinary organization or integration. If population education is taught in an interdisciplinary format, traditional ways are not going to work. It will have to be done through some innovation and some renovation.